All right, Brett. Good morning. We're live. Thanks for jumping on with
Yeah,
me.
yeah, you bet, Connor.
I'll give you the floor. Why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself briefly, just so the audience understands who you are, where you've been, what you're building.
Sure. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm the founder of Build Data. We're a software company in the construction industry, and our core focus is to modernize the information and decision-making support of the craft labor out there working on the job site. I grew up in construction and started in the field. That was my first job, so I understand the five senses experience of being out there and being a laborer out there in the job site. And then that was back when I was a teenager, and then I've had a lot of different experiences between then and now. But that's what I'm doing now.
So, for anybody that's not in the construction industry, can you help clarify what a craft laborer is specifically? Are those like just subcontractors?
Oh no, yeah, great. That's a great question. So when I use that skilled craft labor wording, it really gets into so the people if you're driving by any job site and you see people with tool belts on and tools in hand, those are the laborers. And when we really get into the description of being like craft labor or skilled craft labor, you're talking about somebody who's now learned the craft or an art form of a trade. So like a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter, HVAC person, someone doing roofing or structural steel work and stuff like that. Not just your basic labor of, basically helping or lifting something. So craft really gets into talking about these are crafts that are learned in kind of a master apprentice relationship. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about craft labor.
Got it. And could you give a little insight into your construction company specifically before Built Data? What were you doing specifically? Did you have a specialization? Were you just a general contractor? Were you doing residential, commercial? Just any
Okay.
kind of background on that.
Yeah. So I grew up, like I said before, I grew up as a laborer, and then I was in commercial HVAC, so heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and plumbing. And then so when I started up my prior contracting company back in like 2014, 13, it was 2013. I was a commercial mechanical contractor, so it was all commercial work, no residential. And by mechanical in the construction industry, there that means the pretty much that usually is just talking about the HVAC, and so heating, ventilation, air conditioning system. Sometimes it overlaps into plumbing. And then over the course of me running that company, it was commercial, HVAC. I had electrical and plumbing contracts. Generally, I was using subcontractors for those part of the work scope. I was also a licensed technology systems contractor here in the state of Minnesota, and that was specifically around like temperature controls. So the thermostat, and in commercial building, it's a little more complicated with that. So it'd be the temperature controls. I was doing public work, so for some counties and cities and schools districts. I was also doing private work that could be from just a small little remodel of some little thing in, like, let's say a strip mall. Maybe a Subway was converting into some juice store or something like that, all the way up to churches, ground up storage buildings, other types of office buildings. I was also doing in other aspects of the industry is you have kind of plan and spec. That means there's an architect and engineering team who really drafted the design documents, then handed those things over to the construction team to build. And then we were also doing what would be called design build. And that would be where we were doing design. So I had my mechanical engineers doing the design, and then we would also build it. So I had a really broad spectrum within the commercial space. No residential. I did residential as a teenager, and I worked on some projects, but my experience is primarily in commercial and light industrial spaces.
And yeah, so it sounds like you had a lot going on, definitely a lot of expertise.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a
yeah,
lot.
which is great. But what was the catalyst to say, okay, I don't want to run my own construction company anymore, and I want to build builtdata.io? Was there anything specifically that led you to that decision?
It wasn't like a light bulb decision. It was more over time, and part of that would be, being a trade contractor. So being a contractor that's doing one of those trades, and you employ the laborers, it's a really tough it's a tough job. There's just a lot going on. There's a lot of coordination. There's a lot of risk. Every day you wake up and you've got to get work in place. We got to build this wall. We got to build this piping system. We got to set this equipment, and you just got that every day. And it's a challenge out there. And then over time, my interest and my personal background is passions is a lot into education and digital knowledge transfer and building up systems for that and finding efficiency. So it was a little bit over time as I was back in construction running my prior company. I really realized that I was solving a problem of my own, and then at one point I really kind of pulled my head up and really was like, "Hey, I'm solving a problem that all contractors have." And as I dug deeper into that and the path we were on, I thought that sounds much more rewarding. I can impact a lot more people. There's probably a great prize if we're super successful at doing what we're doing. And so that's when I made the decision. And that was about 20. At that point, I decided, no, I think built data is my future. And so then wound down the construction company, put all effort into built data.
Very cool. Can we maybe speak to, or from your perspective, is there a major labor shortfall in the construction industry in general? I feel like that's something I hear just as somebody that's not directly involved in it. Considering you're more directly involved, would you say that's true as well?
Absolutely. Hands down. Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you think the industry can address that? And then I'm curious too, because it seems like you were in the thick of it. You were doing the labor, hiring the laborers, and you kind of said, "This job is tough, and I'm worn out, and I'm gonna follow something in the same industry, but something I'm more passionate about." Is that what a lot of people are doing, or like how do you prevent that, knowing that it is a tough job? How do you encourage people to go into it if there is such a labor shortfall?
Yeah, this is a tough one for society at large. Really, we've just over. I would attribute this to decades worth of where does society put attention? From the youngsters growing up, where are we telling them there's opportunity? And as a society at large, especially in the States here, we've done such a just big message of hey, everybody should go to college. Well, not necessarily everybody should go to college. And then I think what's happened too is definitely there's a huge labor shortage. It's only getting worse. I think the last stat I saw on the median age of a laborer in the United States is in like the low 40s, like 42, 43. That was like the median age in the last stat I saw. And everything I know internally here is we're approaching a big brain drain over the next 10 years. A lot of people are be retiring because they're skewed into older ages. So they're leaving, and we've just done a real bad job as a whole attracting people to the trades and this type of work. So you just got kind of this big macro issue. And then at a smaller level, that is tough work. You show up, it's usually early mornings. It's a job site that's potentially dirty and noisy. It's just a sea of changing people. It's hard to know what's going on. And then I think in many ways, as a laborer, it's kind of a lonely job a lot of times. You don't know if you're getting like, does anybody care? What am I doing? Where do I fit into this thing? So I think where companies need to be focused on that are bringing in talent is you really got to work on acclimating these people to it, helping them, getting better feedback loops into what they're doing. And then it is any of these trades, any of the trades that you learn, it really still is a master and apprentice relationship because it's a craft and it's an art form. And in my own opinion and experience, for example, a lot of it that I grew up, it was my father and a couple other of his key employees that were my mentors. And I'm working as an apprentice under them. And you have to see a lot of situations multiple times, but with little different variants for that master to kind of impart, here's what you do in this situation. And so where I'm going with that is that these trades and for the people coming in who have grown up in a very digital native world, and then you've got this older class that's moving out. How do these two connect? How do we impart training to them? It's a big challenging thing. And I think, it's interesting is a lot of my just my friends and people that have kids, and they're trying to now have these conversations about what should my kid do. And I'm hearing just a lot from my own circles of people saying, no, I think I'm going to tell my kid maybe should like explore the trades, and so it's kind of an interesting thing. And you're seeing a lot of it. You'll just see news headlines about it. So the labor shortage is real. It's only getting worse. And as an insider of the industry, a lot of times I see some of the chatter about this, and it's like, well, yeah, but we kind of bring these people in and put them in a meat grinder, and maybe we need to fix the meat grinder first before we chew these people up, because it's hard work. And so it's just a big challenge overall. It's nothing that can be solved super easily, but as a whole, it's really constraining this. We need people, we need them to be more productive. That's constraining what we can do as humans as far as what we want to build. So yeah, it's a huge problem, Connor. Yeah.
So you kind of mentioned general laborer, and I don't know, I kind of would agree that that does sound like a tough way to start. I mean, are there other areas, more skilled trades, or can you articulate maybe other paths that people can take? Maybe a young person listening to this, like, maybe you could, what the path could
Yeah.
be, an electrician, right? I always hear that one. I don't know a lot of specifics. You can join the union, there's a sustainable path to six figures and
Yep.
great benefits or things like that. So I don't know if you have a recommendation. Maybe if you were talking to a friend that's a young person, you'd say, no, don't do the general labor thing, but actually this path, there's a lot of demand. There's good earning potential long term and things like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great one. So, in one way, like I see good opportunity for someone, let's say, to join and be like, just get into carpentry, right? And just, it gets you exposed. It gets you exposed into the environment of construction. Do I actually like to show up at a job site like this? Do I like what this entails? Generally, if someone likes to work with their hands and be productive and finish the day and be able to look at, hey, I built that, and get that satisfaction, that's good. And then skills from carpentry are a good launching pad into a lot of other ones. So that's a good one, just to like, do I even like this stuff, right? Do I like the environment? For those that, and then to get into, yeah, you could join a union. You can go through their training program. And in some parts of the country, it's more heavy union labor. Other parts of the country, it's heavy non-union. If you find a good company that has a good kind of training regimen in advancing, that's good. But then I think for someone that really has a desire that, and you hear about STEM, so science, technology, what is it, engineering and math, well, that's what construction is all day long. So if someone has some strong aptitudes in that, but they don't really like a school environment, they want to be in the real, I want to be touching things and doing things for real, then I think any of like the heating, electrical, plumbing, uh, those ones have so much opportunity. And what I like to tell young people, if I'm talking to them, is don't really get too hung up on, well, I want to exactly be this, because there are so many different ways you can go in some of those. But the HVAC, electrical, plumbing, they are heavy science. And so there's much more craft to that. And you could start in residential, maybe you move on and eventually move on into commercial. You're going through a training program. I've started to see more schools are starting to have, even down into like high schools are having a lot more programs starting to bubble up. There's industry partnerships that are starting to provide more classwork and exposure to the trades. And really, you can go anywhere in construction. It is a really broad industry. So it's good to sample, I think. And I think if you're going to, each of those trades is a little different. They're almost like tribes. They think differently. And it's just kind of like, find the right tribe that fits what you like to do. And then really, it's really important to find good people that really want you to excel. So it's really finding that good mentor, that master. Those are the key things, because those are the people that are I had really great mentors that taught me really great skills. And so that's a big part of it, is really find those people. But there's more and more opportunities. But definitely the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing trades themselves. And there's going to be a big deficit of people doing it. And what's nice too is you can get into it. Let's say college path versus going the trades path. You don't necessarily need to take on any debt. You're gonna be earning as you're learning, basically, right? And then what's kind of nice is at the end of the day, you put your tools away and you go home, and you can't really take your work home with you, so to speak, because your work's at the job site. And so there's many aspects of that, for kind of a balance of life to your life that's pretty rewarding.
100%. I kind of want to pivot too because I think this is contributing, but I think you'd better know better than I would. If there's such a labor shortfall, is that causing contractors to need to pay these laborers and folks more to get people on the job site? And what have you seen like from a wage perspective, maybe, pre-pandemic to now in 2024? What does that look like?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting too. Because then in a lot of areas, the economic shutdowns really disrupted a lot of things because projects got shut down, projects got delayed. And the interesting nuance of labor, especially skilled labor, the craft ones, is that the way they really think, and then the contractors that employ them, their mindset is all about where are they right now, and what are they doing physically. So I'm at this specific job site and I'm trying to get this specific stuff done, right? And if that project goes on timeout for whatever reason, COVID, whatever reason, timeout, we don't need you here right now. That crew now shifts and moves somewhere, and their focus now is over there. So trying to get them back as a challenge is one, and that also is a dynamic for the company that employs them, because if you don't have the work to keep those people busy, and you got to tell them, no, I don't have work for you today, maybe check back tomorrow or next week or whatever, they can go get a job almost anywhere in the country generally. And now there's going to be pockets where, there's some definitely hotter markets, and there's markets of the country that are less. But if they want to really get a job, they could relocate if they wanted to, even within a local market. There's the good ones, there's a strong demand for them. So it's a big challenge because the contractors that employ them, or even the general contractors upstream who are putting together a team of the trade contractors and then all the laborers of those people, if you don't keep them focused on your job, they're going somewhere else because that's what their job is, right? To build stuff. And trying to get them back is a challenge. So it's a constant hamster wheel of challenges for everybody, which is really, my dad used to tell me a lot, would be, all these projects have a momentum, and when they lose momentum and everybody disperses to go to other projects, it's really hard to get them back, right? And so that's the challenge from the job site. It's the challenge from the contractor employing the specific group of laborers. And so the talented laborers, they can demand more money for sure, right? Some maybe chose that time to, I'm okay, now it's time to retire, like in COVID. Okay, I'm near retirement. I'm done with this game. But the talented ones, they can command top dollar, because it's not just, I would say the talented ones that would be of desire in my own experience when I was recruiting, hiring, and retaining, our good employees, is not just the ones that are good technically, but the ones that are really good with interpersonal skills and can communicate well, because that is the nature of what they have to do. And you'd have some that are really good at the technical skills, but they're kind of a jerk, and they don't really communicate well. And at the end of the day, it's a team sport. So, so the ones with the talent and are really working on their communication skills and that stuff, they rise to the top and they can command a lot of money. And that's just going to continue to be the same, I think.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to get at is I don't think it's a secret to you. It's not to me that, housing and I would assume commercial construction projects. So let's just focus on like new starts or brand new builds are really expensive right now. So is labor a major contributing factor to that? And then what are the other contributing factors? Obviously, you need the raw materials. I mean, have those truly gone up as much as they have? Or I just kind of want to get your take on why is everything so expensive in the United States right
Yeah. Okay. I'll dissect that a
now?
couple ways. Labor, if you take just a general, like a construction project, it was X dollars amount, total cost to the owner, whoever's building it. General rule of thumb, probably 20-25%, maybe 30% of that cost is the labor to do the actual building. So it's a huge chunk. of any budget of any project. So that's huge. The material costs too, yeah, those have been rising too. Just that the logistics of that supply chain and getting those materials, and what you're trying to do as the builders and the construction team is you're trying to bring labor and tools and materials all together at one spot and have them hum and be super productive. And then you have, it's just a massive supply chain because you got all these different trades, all these different vendors supplying, and you're trying to bring it in, and you might have a hiccup. Let's say windows are now delayed. Well, that has domino effects throughout the channel, right? And then if you have 25% of labor or 25% of the project's labor, and we have a disruption and maybe something gets built wrong, it has to get redone, any hiccup along the way creates time and delays and cost delays. So just, and it's really, really hard to do that. And then you throw in disruptions, like I said, supply chain, anything, any labor, it gets really hard. So costs can go up. And then, on my background, I spent 17 years in mortgage finance. So I have a heavy finance background. And I think another reason, why is everything escalating? For the last couple decades, we have just been printing money in this country. And I think we're now starting to really see the effects of that across the board. And so there's not much we can do with that from the construction industry perspective. It's just a reality of what we're dealing with. And it's super challenging to bring those in. And then I just think so many of those costs, like, you might have a spike in a certain material or a shortage in a certain material. And while it might just be that one, it ripples. It ripples through the job.
So you had a mortgage background. I'm curious kind of your perspective of the state of the housing market as well, because it's
Oh,
my
yeah.
understanding that we're not building enough. Nobody's selling because they were able to lock in low interest rates during the pandemic. You have all these boomers that are retiring that own their houses in cash, but they're still not selling.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm kind of on point there, or you would agree with those points, or if there's anything else that's kind of preventing this. Because I think it's crazy that mortgage rates have almost doubled, but yet I bought my home in 2021 and it's still gone up in value 10% since I bought it,
Yeah.
which is a little crazy to me. So I don't know what your perspective is on all this and kind of where it's headed over the next year or 2 years.
I'm super curious because I just noticed, and I haven't been paying much to the mortgage rates in a long time because they'd been stuck in a tight range. But when I got into mortgage, rates were just starting to come down from like 9%. So I remember when we went under 8. And I'd heard other people tell me, oh, they're way back. They'd been in the teens and stuff. But my perspective was only they were around 8-9%. As when I had become a homeowner and stuff. And then when I started to work in the industry, we're at 8. Then we went down over years. We had a massive refinancing wave. So anybody that was already in a house had ample opportunity to get restructured at a lower rate, right? And then they might not. And then anybody purchasing is coming in at those rates. And now as they've started to move up, that's definitely something that can suppress mortgage activity. Refinancings will definitely drop because there's no opportunity to improve your financial situation because your rate would be higher. And then the purchase stock, you think of it, well, if money was cheaper, it's maybe fueling a boost in demand. So more homes are getting purchased, but they're also getting secured at decent rates. And then if they're continuing to climb, and now, well, who's going to replace them? And if you get kind of just from a generational standpoint, you have this boomer generation who's been in this and rode this out and is about to exit out. Well, who are they going to sell to? And so I'm very curious right now because rates are now back in, and this is a big trough. Rates have been so low for so long. I used to, when I was in mortgage and quoting rates all the time, I was tracking the real-time movement of the mortgage-backed securities and watching the rate fluctuations, but eventually it became such a tight range. Why even watch this stuff anymore? But now we're starting to crack back up. So I think it's an interesting, what will happen to prices at a macro level? And is there the demand to support it? Would the prices adjust? Right? Would the prices have to adjust down? I don't know. It's a very, I think we're in a challenging time to figure that out with just the dynamics of the generations and then the financial markets and what's going on there. I think I'm just as confused potentially as you on that one. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think there's constraints on both the supply and the demand side. Nobody's selling, right?
yeah,
And nobody's buying because I don't know. I just look at some of these mortgage prices. If you're buying a, whatever, $700,000 home in California and
oh,
all in it with property tax and insurance, I mean, right, you're paying 5,000-6,000 a month. I mean, who's affording that? It's just, I don't
yeah,
know. That's what I ask myself.
yeah, yeah.
You mentioned something about that kind of with like new generations. I know that's also affecting the construction industry. Can you maybe speak to what you see or what it was like maybe when you owned your construction company with your staff and your laborers and their expectations, their working style, their adoption of technology versus now, right? I think you have a lot of Gen Z entering the workforce. Millennials are entering their 30s, maybe even some like late 30s for some. How has that affected the industry and how do you see it continuing to
Yeah,
affect the industry going forward?
that's like I think the core of that immediately to me, if we're just talking about the generational changes, is I think of it more of an attitude about information. Their attitudes about information. And what I mean by that, and communication in the modes of communication. So I had two interns that worked for me in my construction company. I got them out of the University of Minnesota. And I have a couple stories with these guys that were different for me. And they're both great employees, very dedicated, super smart, but we'd have conversations and I'd be talking to them and they're immediately on their phone and doing something. At first, I was like, "Are you actually listening to me? Right? Is this what's going on?" But they're both already searching more information, like based on what I was talking about. They're already starting to augment what I'm telling them, and so this was I had to adapt to it. And right, no, actually, they're actually engaged. This is just how they process information and how they go to work on it. And so this was a different thing for me. I had to adapt to. And another thing with these two is that I had a brand new printer sitting in a box, sitting in the office that sat there for a long, 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 long time. And I was like, "You guys, you can use that printer. You just got to open up. It's brand new, right? It's never been used." But and where I'm going with this is their thought of, I don't need to get it on paper. I don't need it on paper because I'm not going to be thinking about it that way. Right. And so there's just different things about that. I think also the difference is, if I think through some of the people we had come through, is how they're thinking about, just the work environment and some of the attitudes is, some of it's okay because it's changing, because maybe I don't want to be so worn out from my day and I've put in so many long hours into this job and I need some balance, because I think it's important for us all to have balance. And so some of the kind of older attitudes were just go 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 till you're worn out, right? And work these super long days. And where I would find it would be interesting is we'd be even offering overtime, so paid time and a half or even double time. And I know this from other contractors I talked to. They had a hard time getting people to want to work the overtime, right? And so there's these little attitudes. Yeah, I don't want to. Some would, and they make really good money for it. But it was just this interest. Really, you don't want to do that. And so there's just this interesting thing I think about this balance of, well, no. And some of it could, we could argue or debate it, is that good or bad? I don't know. And it's very localized to that individual in my own experience. But there's some of that. And then I think, and this is kind of big about what we're doing at Built Data stuff is as we think about how do these people learn and how do they share and how do they communicate? So if you step back a couple decades and you're, let's say, in construction, you're a labor out at a job site, you're really stuck in your world there, right? Your world is the job here, things you can see and touch and talk to and do right here physically. Because what would it take? You'd have to drive somewhere or maybe make a phone call to connect with somebody, right? That's not the way it is now. When we have our smartphones, we can ultra connect people that are not in the same geographic spot. The industry, though, in my opinion, has not necessarily done a great job of transforming in those aspects for the younger generation coming in. right? Like they just have not done a good job. And this is a big part of the challenge of, I think, recruiting people, making it interesting. As people, we spend our lives on our phones, and then well, I don't get to use that. I'm not even on a screen. What? Even though it can't always be on the screen when I'm putting physical things together, but there's a happy medium in my idea of things. And so I think these are things that are challenging for the construction industry going through the generational changes that are heavily underway right now, because you kind of have the millennials generations now really in their early careers, maybe starting to hit mid careers. The top performers of those, the high achievers, are really starting to move up the ranks and catch attention. And then you got the ones coming in behind them, right? And then you've got the older ones that are really teed up to retire, and they have all the knowledge, right? They have all this really wonderful knowledge, but how do we transfer that to the new crop that thinks differently about information in a real fundamental level? These are the big challenges I see, and what's quite interesting to us.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And maybe we can pivot to kind of the problem that you're trying to solve with built data. And if I'm understanding correctly, or I think a big problem, you kind of talked about it earlier, is that you have this kind of logistics game in construction, or is the left hand talking to the right hand, and you have to have somebody that holds it all together and makes sure, if you're building a house, for example, the framing is up or the subs are showing up on time, and you're doing things in the proper order and efficiently. So
Yeah.
maybe you could articulate that first. I mean, how big of a problem is that in construction? It's just efficiency and people doing the wrong work at the wrong time, or people not showing up on time. I mean, if everything ran perfectly, what
Yeah.
would that do from like a cost elimination perspective, or maybe like an ROI and being able to complete more jobs in less times, things like that?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so construction again is super hard because you're building the buildings, everything's coming into being, right? Everything's flowing in, and it's just a lot of people, tools, and materials happening. And the industry right now has accepted, every single contractor I talk to, I'll say, the industry has a stat that 20% of labor time is wasted simply due to miscommunication at the job site. Do you agree with me? And almost all of them be like, yeah, Brett, it's probably actually a lot more, right? And so this is big. And so if you look at that, that's about 14 hours a week of, let's say, a 40-hour week. That's just getting wasted. There's 11 million laborers in the US alone. So if you do that math, you're saying, okay, we've accepted we're going to burn 154 million labor hours this week alone is wasted. And these people are getting paid pretty good money, and and they still get paid by their employer, whether or not they're being productive or not, because they're hourly employees. So they could show up and be twiddling their thumbs, and you're still maybe paying them 50, 60, 70, 80 bucks an hour, right? Who knows what you're being paid, but they're expensive labor. So this is a huge, huge problem. You have another stat I saw recently, which was, I think it was in 2022, the industry had 31 billion in reworks alone. So rework. So let's just think that one through. Something was built, it just was built wrong and had to get rebuilt, right? And so hugely inefficient. 31 billion. And so it's not like we built it correct eventually. So we had the right people, tools, materials, knowledge, designs, or whatever was took. We just at first did it wrong because there was miscommunication. And where some of that happens is that, so I've been in so many job site meetings. So the typical, like especially a commercial project, this is how the week starts. It's Monday morning. In the job trailer are all the foremen. So the lead people of all the different trades contractors that are there to do work that week, let's say. And then the general contractor has their superintendent. So that's the quarterback of the team. And they sit there and they all now are like, okay, we're going to do this week. And they all lay out their work plan for the week. Almost none of them do I ever see take notes. And then we just, clap our hands and break. And now we go off to work. And then the week gets derailed. And for example, here's a good example. Let's say you're the electrical foreman and I'm the HVAC foreman. And we're sitting there and I'm communicating, hey, on Thursday, I have these rooftop units coming in, and we're like 10 of them, and we got to have a crane here, and we're going to be setting them on the roof. And so Friday, your team can show up and begin wiring them up, because that's our works together. Now, maybe Tuesday, I find out, no, delay. from my shipment. So I've changed course, but you've never heard of this. So now it's Friday morning, and let's say you have 3 of your top, electricians showing up to do this work, and they are calling you saying, Connor, there's no rooftop units here. And you're all, what do I do now? Right? I'm paying you to do nothing. Where can I send you now? And so this is the sort of communication, like, when you walk on a job site as a laborer with your phone, I mean, you could be hyper connected to any of your other social circles in any capacity, be it on any platform you want to be. You could know what's going on, what they had for breakfast, what their plans are, what they're laughing about, some silly meme they just saw. You walk onto the job site, who's actually here? Like, who's doing what? How do I who's actually the person I'm supposed to talk to? Good luck. You kind of step back in the past. And so that's where, construction has massive opportunity for this challenge, because it's so disconnected. It's a highly collaborative project, but it is like organized chaos because there's no connectivity. And that just burns time, and where our focus once again is, we really get down to that, the information and decision making needs of that labor, and they're there to do their job, which is to build stuff. But if a lot of times they don't have the right information, or there's something different and they need a decision made, and getting that support is so frustrating for them all. The amount of times I've been on a job site where I hear like a tradesperson being like, oh, the architect doesn't know anything, the engineer doesn't know anything. Well, they might, but you just don't have a good way to like interact with them, and they don't have a good way to get you support. So it's easy to cast blame on a nameless, faceless person and say they don't know anything, but this is kind of the friction, which is there's so much work to just get information, which is insane. And because in 2024 here, I mean, you can get information, especially if we're sitting at our desktops like we are, or like, oh, I need to add an app to my phone. Oh yeah, I removed it. Boom, it's back on, right? Trying to do a similar sort of information retrieval task at the job site, good luck.
And so can you maybe articulate exactly what your solution is? Is it an application? Is it kind of like a project management software for a specific construction project where all the information's in one place, all the contacts are in one place, and then you can ping or direct message the engineer, like you mentioned, or the architect? Is that kind of it, or how does it work specifically?
Yeah. And it's, we're not a project management software. There's a lot of project management software. We would integrate with those. What we do is something different, because what happens right now, our biggest competitor is just phone calls and texts. That's our biggest competitor, because that's the status quo. So, but for what this looks like for the field, you kind of hit on it. Just picture any other sort of social media app that you're using. That's how it looks in the field to the labor. And basically it's where they can share their reality, like, here's what's happening, I need something, I have a question about something. This is where what our software does, because the laborer, they don't necessarily know who has this information, who makes the decision. Honestly, they don't even really truly care. They just are like, I need help, just give me the help so I can continue forward. So what our app does is now we have a unified platform, so they can now communicate this, and then our technology will connect the people and resources to the frontline need and bring it to them, right? In a real simplistic way. I think back to like when Bill Gates used to have this information at your fingertips talk, and nobody really knew what he was talking about. But now you go into Google and you start typing something, and it is doing a fantastic job of bringing information right to you. And it's the similar concept, like, hey, I need help. Let's have the information come to you versus I got to go hunt and gather it and try to find it. So that's what we do is we really just provide the support level for the field themselves, and then bring whatever resources from other entities or databases or systems to.
And do you have any specific metrics on ROI or savings that if a contractor implements your product and platform versus somebody that does not, from a cost savings perspective?
Yeah, we don't. We're just going to market. Our early customers are just starting up now, so we don't have heavy track record on that. We're going to be quantifying that for sure. What we think on that, and then I'll get back to another part, is everybody knows there's this 20% wasted labor, and we think we can maybe help people get up to possibly half of that, which would be significant. We're not going to get all of it. That's not going to happen. But where we'll start to quantify that is, let's say a contractor has estimated a job as just from their own historical records. Oh, it's going to take me 1,000 labor hours to complete this job. This is how I used to have old data like this, and I'd bid projects. Well, that's going to be probably about a 2,000-hour job, right? So that's how you bid it. That was in your budget. And now if you can bring it in, and let's say you had 800 labor hours, immediately we picked up 200 labor hours from our estimate on that. And that's how we're going to look to quantify it. And then when I was running my construction company, the metric I was looking at was really top line revenue per laborer. And I think my average stats before were in the industry sector I was in, it was about of work per, or 150 hours of work per my laborer. And I was pushing that up to like 250, 275. So I was churning way more output per laborer on it because I was dissecting it that way. But I think the main way we're going to quantify it in the early days is with these contractors saying, wow, I really brought that in under, like I said, 800 hours, labor hours, when I budgeted 1,000 to do that. And that money just drops to their bottom line on that. Cause I thought I was going to have this. Nope. Just drop down. That's how we think we're going to quantify it.
And so overall, are you hopeful that the construction industry can change and kind of come out of potential customers and selling to them? Is there a lot of openness to being like, okay, yeah, this does make sense. I do want to invest in this. It's going to take some time to learn, but I'm all in. Or is there a lot more hesitation still?
Yeah, that's a couple funny stories on that. That's a great question. So some of my when I had my construction company, we were bringing some of the new employees onto what was the Built Data app. At that time, it wasn't called Built Data because it was just our internal solution. And some of these younger ones, right? So let's say you're like 18, 19, 20 years old, and they're like, well, this doesn't already exist. That was their mentality, right? Like, I'm like, no, guys, we're stuck in the past in this industry. But they want it, right? And I think the market's going to answer the need at some point in time, because the market will need it for productivity, for education, for training, for bringing in people, for multiple reasons. When we sit down, and there's some contractors are just, you're never going to get them to change, right? They're just, this is how I do it. I ain't changing. And those aren't our prospective customers. But the ones that are really looking to, how do we continue to improve? I'm trying to bring a better cohesion to my team and my workforce, because a team that's really united in focus, in direction, can really be quite productive. Those ones, when we sit in front of them, what I love, and I get a kick out, we just did an onboarding kickoff for a customer in Arizona that's coming online from managers. I'm zooming into this meeting, and there's managers in a big boardroom, and then we've got job superintendents dialing in from their work trucks, and their safety vests and everything. And any field person we put our app in front of immediately tells us use cases. Oh, I could use it this way. I could use it that way. Their quality control manager looks at it and is like, oh, I love this. This gives me so much data that I don't have, as far as when the dust settles on a construction project. Like, who did what? Like, why was something done a certain way? Why did we veer off blueprints and drawings a certain way? You don't have this information. And then even this general superintendent, so the individual that leads other superintendents on projects, what was interesting in this particular one, he said, I could see how the laborers might want to share some things really easily here, where they might not do it just because there's no mode for them to share it, right? And we're going to capture that. And so, which was cool, because he picked up on kind of a qualitative aspect of what the solution does that I wasn't even telling him, but I know from my own experience. So, the ones that are really going to succeed in the future, I think, because if the contractors are saying, I don't want to change, Well, good luck because the world's changing on you, right? And I don't care who you are, the digital native world's coming at us. And if things in any industry, if that doesn't get made digitally native, your time is marked for when you're going to be done, right? Because he's not you better be thinking that way. And so it's an exciting time. I think to your big question, the construction industry will solve it because we've been building since the time of the pyramids, and now we're talking about building on Mars. And that actually, I can say that, and you're like, I think we might. How, so the construction industry is not going anywhere. The market will demand it. We get there. It's just a matter of like, how long does it take to get there? I think that's my big answer on that question.
So company specifically, what are your end goals, or considering all those market dynamics, and where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, ultimately with built data? Is it an acquisition you're looking at? What are you thinking from your perspective as the founder of this company?
Right now, we believe we have the right solution for a massive pain point. Our core focus is, we use this kind of hashtag field first moniker a lot, and I'm super passionate about this, is bringing modern support to the field, modernizing their whole support, because it's a tough job. They don't get good information decision making support, to drive better digital communities around it, to drive more opportunity to, like to our earlier part of our conversation, learn a trade, grow up the ranks of a trade, make connections. Maybe that helps drive your career because you've met people, and quantify more like what your work experience is, quantify your, like how good of an employee you are, how good of a partner in a project you are, where your skill sets are. So we're going after really big white space that's out there in my mind, because it's the way I look at where we want to be down the line. Yeah, eventually, who knows? We'll potentially sell this company, but we don't have any intention on doing that anytime soon, because we think we have a lot of great work we can do. We think we can be rewarded for our work really well. And my own goal is, the vision I have for what construction looks like. I'll give you a kind of a big thought experiment that packages up how I think. Is I think of like, well, let's try to picture a job site where there's humanoid robots working as laborers on the job site, like doing that stuff. Well, how would these robots have digitized knowledge of all of the nuances of all of the craft laborers? And it's, the most technical ones of that, it's an art form, right? So how would you capture all that and have it digitalized? And I'm a Star Trek fan, so if anybody understood like Star Trek Next Generation, this Borg, like kind of robot collective consciousness, like that's what I think is like, that's where we're going with build data, is that we would have the means and methods of construction graphed, right? So who's doing what? Because at the level of the job site, there's really no digital data at scale. There's no database of things at scale. So that's where we're going. We think we have an opportunity to make a big dent, and the underlying passion of that is to help the field laborers have a better experience, be better, be more productive, and be happier in the work that they do, that we all benefit from.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, I think it's, there's massive opportunity, right? But I think it's going to be a long game. But it sounds like you're ready to play the long game.
Yeah, it's quite some time to get where we're trying to go. Yeah.
All right. So maybe now just to pivot to just a couple questions kind of about you as an entrepreneur.
Sure.
And
Yeah, man.
we kind of tied back to this earlier, advice for younger people. And I think this would help as well. I mean, knowing what you know now, for whatever reason, you didn't stay a laborer or kind of go into a trade. You've ran your own company. Now you're founding another company. Why do you think that you were led down the path of entrepreneurship and being the head guy, the CEO, versus just being an individual contributor or just a worker at a company?
Oh, that's cool. I would say heavy environmental. So my dad was a contractor as I'm growing up. So he already owned his own company. My mom was a school teacher. And then she stayed at home to raise myself and my two brothers. But really instilled in all three of us a love of education and self-learning and drive to learn. And you definitely need that if you're going to go into some entrepreneurial venture, because it's all you got to figure shit out. And then just being around my dad and hearing stories, and just, you just have that early image of, oh, he's working for himself. And then I really gravitated to, I didn't really do any business related things as a teenager or anything. But then as I ended up in college, I started off as a political science major. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. At first, I was going to go I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy, but I couldn't get pilot. I wanted to be a jet fighter pilot, but I had some issues with my eyes that wasn't going to get me qualified for that. So then I ended up just going to college at the University of Minnesota. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but then I eventually ended up in business school. And that really sparked me in my interest. And at the time, I was working quasi in the office for my father. I was doing field work, but he was pushing me into some more kind of project management aspects. And then I hit business school, and I really loved business school. I just liked the whole aspects of thinking about the business and things. But however, though, once I got to business school, I think I had to unlearn a bunch of stuff they taught me, because this is not really how things go down in the real world. And so then I just liked, since then, I've just, on a personal note, why in entrepreneurship, I just like building. I like building in general, building like companies, building up a team, helping build people into better performers, myself included. So I think it was, but probably just that early foundation of like, teach yourself, have drive to learn stuff. You can learn anything you want, right? And here's my dad who's doing it, right? And I think those are the things that drove me and keep me driven in entrepreneurial sort of ventures.
Okay, so considering that journey, what advice would you give to your former self,
Oh,
knowing what you know
wow.
now?
Wow. Oh my gosh. Interestingly, the first thing that comes to mind, and I loved college. I did really well in college, but I had a mentor one time one guy I followed for a long, long time, that proposed an idea. Well, like, what if someone, instead of going to college, over the course of 4 years, did like 8 paid internships, like, so half a year internship, but in different industries and in maybe different job functions. So you'd get a good cross section of things, but more importantly, also, you would develop relationships with people inside those industries. Right. And I think that, to me, if I were to face it right now, today, I probably would opt that way, just because I know over the duration of my career, the relationships, and sometimes these relationships grow and might come back to each other, and someone might be able to help you and where you're trying to go. And I think that's my number one advice to myself, if I could sit myself down, was really focus on those relationships, and in the early days, getting as broad of exposure as I possibly could to many different things, because it's really hard to know. I have 2 children that are now starting to approach, my son's a sophomore, my daughter's a freshman in high school, so I'm starting to approach these decisions, and I'm a big proponent of higher education, but still, I don't know, right? And I think, go where you're passionate, like, about something, because you're going to be working a long time. And I have friends that I've seen pursue careers where, they're not necessarily happy, and they're like, I don't really like anything. And they they'll say, Brett, what, you're doing something exciting. I'm like, yeah, man, it's really fucking hard. but, but, they might have a cushy, but you know what I'm saying? They're like, I don't like it at all, but I'm trapped now. And so I think that's the number one, is get as much broad exposure as possible. Try to meet as many people as you possibly can, and focus on what really drives you passionately. And I think you hopefully will find you're in a good path for your life, or at least the part of your life.
Yeah, I think to your point, looking back at myself, and you're probably going through the same thing with your kids, is picking a college major before you even show up to the university, or you're 18 and they're like, okay, do you want to be an aerospace engineer or business or
Yeah.
accounting, English lit, and you're like, I don't know. I mean, what are the implications of these choices, right? It's a big decision to make when you're 18 and you don't know anything about where
No,
you're going to be 10 years down the line,
no.
which is crazy.
And that's why I think like even going straight from high school to college, even having a gap year, I ended up taking, I went straight, spent 2 years, then I really didn't know what I wanted to do, decided to take a year off. And then I was working in the field for my father's company at that time. And then that's where I really solidified. I think I want to go into business, but I needed to take that time off and really kind of reassess. I'm like, I don't know what I want to do.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, got a couple more for you.
All right.
Let's say hypothetically you lose everything, no money in your bank account
Yeah.
tomorrow. How are you starting over? What are you building? What's that first decision you're making and why?
Oh, that's a huge question, Connor. How would I approach that? Man, that one, because then I got kids, so I'm trying to like isolate it. Like,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
say I didn't have these
I mean,
dynamics. Let's say I was just like,
you could do
like,
anything. You could say, "Hey, I'm just gonna go work for someone else so I can pay my bills and then build something later on." I mean, anything, right? So,
yeah, I
yeah,
would. If I was forced with that, like like I really love this resurgence in like space frontier tech. As a young
mm,
kid, I wanted to be an astronaut as like a little teeny kid, right? And then I wanted to fly a fighter plane. So if I were faced with that, I would probably try to hook up into some venture where I could be excited about like what the hell we're doing, like what like and for me, what drives me a lot is I want to be working on something big. Like I don't want to just do something routine. I'm a builder. Like I'd be bored. So I know myself. I'd like, okay, I'll go find any of these new kind of early doing maybe some hardware in like rockets or air travel. And so I try to find myself in some way, get me in the door and just give me a seat in this company, and then I'll show you that I'm passionate and I work hard and can provide value and seize opportunity inside, and that's what I'd be doing. Yeah, that's what
yeah,
I'd go hunt for a really fertile environment that resonates with me, but also would be a big, let's go do something big.
yeah. I think that's cool. I think it resonates kind of with what you said earlier with getting broad experience or not being afraid to pivot or start over. I mean, it's
Yeah.
something you could do, right? Okay. Next one. Anybody dead or alive that you would add to the Built Data team to build an
Ooh.
amazing company? Who would it be?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Anybody dead or alive? I think like I don't have a specific individual, but I know where we're going with stuff that I really would be looking to hire into our team and get into our team somebody that's really deep in the artificial intelligence and machine learning space. I kind of have conceptual on it. I know where we're going and I'm steering, but like someone who can get into the nitty gritty that also kind of touch on what I said with that thought experiment, the interplay between robots and the digital software, and like in the things that are going with that. Because I think of it also in ways of I picture job sites where laborers also are augmented. Maybe I'm in an exoskeleton suit, so now what used to be like I needed two people to lift this thing up, I can do it by myself, right? And so kind of the blend of the hardware and the software. So I would think like somebody who can be like, who really doesn't care so much about the business, so to speak, but is just such the tech geeks part of it, right? And I don't have that person like a name or something that I can think of, but that would be
But
who I'd be hunting for, like superstar. Let's get this superstar in here and let them go to work and just give them all the resources they need to do a kick-ass job.
yeah, no, I mean that's fair, and I mean it's such a new thing, right? Who are those people? Who is that person? More every day, but those are probably still few and far between. So
Yeah, and who
I
knows? It
think that
could be
makes a lot
like
of
this
sense.
young person who just is a savant about this stuff. All right, come on in, right? I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, my last kind of hypothetical question here, but I'm curious how let's just say hypothetically, maybe built data is really successful, it's acquired, you're left with, let's just say, $10 million in your bank account after taxes. I'm curious how you would invest that money to preserve it, or how you would spend it. What are you doing at that point to with your wealth?
Yeah, I would a couple. I saw that question when you sent over. I was thinking about some of that question, and I think there's some ways I would want to put that into something that's cash, like a cash flowing, probably business that might be really stable and pretty boring in general, right? But just and sometimes I think of almost, not that I would do these, but just like if you can picture, growing up, I had a friend whose dad had a car wash. So you just, you self car wash and stuff. And that thing just had quarters, like buckets and buckets of quarters. And just, it brought in cash. Right. But it was like, really didn't take much work. And so I would think of something like that, that was just a boring thing, but just like people use it, potentially could bring in cash. Just so I'd bring cash in. Um, I've spent different times in my career where I've actively traded stocks and stuff. So a chunk of me, I would probably build up that regimen again and be in a heavy sort of stock trading mentality, but with very limited risk on it. Not a big chunk of that. And then I'd probably be parking some of that. I would definitely be in some potentially some cryptocurrencies. I've been a big fan of Bitcoin since the very beginning that I ran across it. I think a lot of those things have potential, and then possibly just some selective real estate, selective commercial real estate, right, where it's driving cash flow. That's where
Yeah.
I'd be putting some of that money. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm on board. It's kind of what you mentioned, right? I think if you were to make that sum of money, I think you want to make sure that money's coming in. You've worked so hard to build it up that at this point, you're okay. How does money come in? So I have my baselines covered, my bases covered. So
Yeah,
100%.
exactly.
Well, hey, Brett, I mean, I really appreciate the conversation. I learned a ton.
Yeah, man.
I want to thank you again for doing this, but I'll give you the floor to close out. Where can people find you? Any closing thoughts? The floor is yours.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks, Connor. Yeah, I really appreciate you reaching out and having time to have this conversation. And hopefully you learned some about construction that you didn't know before.
Yeah.
Where can you find me? BuiltData.io is our website. I'm Brett at BuiltData.io is my email. You can find me. You can hit me up that way. That's the best way to find me.
Cool. Awesome, Brett. I'll put all that info in the description. Hey, thanks again. And yeah, best of luck.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. You have a great one, Connor.
Thanks.